Hello and welcome to the Discover History channel on YouTube. What we're doing today is a video because we've had a request. What we want you to do is send us requests. What do you want us to talk about? So far we've had lots of interest for cookery. We've also had lots of interest for history of Worcester related things, and we had one this morning from a child who is doing a project. That child is Lily. And Lily is doing a project, so this video is dedicated to you, Lily, and you're doing a project on World War II. So the video request is all about evacuees. Now, during this coronavirus, most people are actually making links with the past. For example, I did one the other day about posters from the war, coughs and sneezes, spreads diseases and so on. And at the moment, we're actually saying, shield the vulnerable. The government has said stay indoors and shield the vulnerable, and that happened before the Second World War actually broke out, and that was down to the fact that Britain made a huge amount of preparations before World War II began. And a perfect example of this would be the formation of the Observer Corps in 1925. That was before the war broke out in 1939. So what actually happened? Well, the important thing was to let everyone know about the evacuation scheme. So prior to the war breaking out, so when it all started to look as if we were going into war in 1938 and 1939, leaflets were published and placed through people's doors. This is quite an iconic one, and as it says, evacuation, why and how. And this was all before the war. So parents could see these, they could read through the pros and cons, and the main thing is it's actually stating that we had been bombed in the Great War earlier, targeting mainly the factories of the cities, and there was also some doom and gloom in some fiction writers in the 1920s and 30s talking about attacks from the air. So it was very important to move children away from the heavily populated areas and the areas where the factories were. So anyone living in a town or city would have taken advice from this and thought, I'm going to send my child away. But at the same time as registering your child, there was also a background campaign going on. And amazingly, and I take my hat off to them, the Women's Institute were very much part of this project. And it was a way of going around people's houses. Some people did complain, thinking it was a little bit too much prying into private lives. And they filled in visitor record forms like this one here. And it basically asks you a number of questions. For example, if war should come and they move children or vulnerable people away from city centres, would you be able to take some? Yes or no? And then it goes into a bit more detail. Do you have spare rooms that could house one person, two people or so on? And also it covers things like, do you have bedding in blankets for X, Y and Z people that may have to stop at your home? So this is a very good thing. We often think of evacuees going on a train, getting off, going to the church hall and being hand-picked. That very rarely happened. We were much better organised than that. So WI, the Women's Voluntary Service, people like that went around filling in these report forms, and evacuation officers were set up in a number of towns and cities. In Worcester, our evacuation office was in fact Tudor House in Friar Street, and they would have collated all this information for their area. And when it came to evacuation day, they would look through the list and say, this one is a person that can have 4 children, they've got bedding for 4 children, they've got a bedroom that can house 4 children in. So it was much better organised than the case of getting off the train and being hand-picked. However, that did go on also. So once the parents had registered and all these different organisations were collating who could accept children, the government then started to look at the dangerous towns and cities. And they designated them as red areas, danger areas, and they included places like Birmingham, London, Coventry, Southampton, Liverpool, all the big cities, towns and ports. And they also designated little villages in the countryside that would be classified as safe areas. And what followed is the parents would then get a letter, and this letter basically prepared them for the evacuation that was going to take place. School teachers, by the way, heavily involved in this also. And it says that you have to turn up on a designated time and date, and you had to take with you the following items. So this is a list of items. Now, a little tip for Lily, would be to maybe get these items together and photograph it and say this is what to take on an evacuation. So we have at the top 2 vests, 2 underpants, 2 shirts, 2 pyjamas, 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of shoes, 1 pair of Wellington boots, sometimes referred to as gum boots, by the way, 1 pair of trousers, 1 pullover, 6 handkerchiefs, 1 toothbrush, 1 face flannel, 1 comb, 2 towels, and that's everything on our list. Oh, apart from the 3 important things: gas mask, identity card and ration book. And all those items had to go, interestingly, in a small suitcase. Now, when people go on holiday, they seem to take a lot of things with them, almost the kitchen sink. If that happened during the war, there would be no room for children in particular. So you were only allowed a small suitcase. So, Lily, all those items you need to photograph with a suitcase, and then I want you to attempt to put all those items in your small suitcase. Make sure you put the pictures on our Discover History Facebook page. Maybe tweet us, let us know how you got on. But the evacuation process was all planned very much before the war actually broke out. We were expecting war any day, and it was decided when we get to the 1st of September 1939, we were going to initiate the evacuation of people. Now, we've been focusing on children. Children were not the only ones to be evacuated. Pregnant women, we've also got those with sight problems. It's surprising how many things were evacuated, or how many people were evacuated. Works of art from art galleries were evacuated. Animals from zoos were also evacuated. People often wonder about that one. Think about it: an inner city zoo with lions. Bombing of a city, fences fall down, you can have lions wandering about. So it was so important to evacuate things out to the countryside, away from the towns, cities, factories, which were going to be bombed. Now, on the 1st of September 1939, when it came to the evacuation of children, it was given a code word: Operation Pied Piper. And posters like this one appeared at the railway station, and it says railway passenger services during evacuation, and it basically says please do not use the transport on that particular date. We need to use it purely for the movement of children. Amazingly, over 1 million children plus teachers were moved out to the countryside starting from the 1st of September 1939. An amazing undertaking. This is a famous photograph of some people moving down to the railway stations, being placed on the train and being moved away to the countryside. It's quite a famous picture, this one. You'll have to guess who they are in the picture. And people turned up with their gas masks, their identity cards, their ration books, their suitcases of clothes. They even had to carry food, some sandwiches with them to keep them going for the journey. And amazingly, it was that well organised. Children had to wear a label, a famous label tied to their clothes. So people at the railway station, the evacuation officers, knew where they were going and what trains to put them on. Now, the evacuation of children was all coordinated by what I've already mentioned, the evacuation officer, and also billeting officers. And I've actually got an armband for Worcestershire County Council, and as you can see, it's WCC and then EVAC. So this is the Evacuation Officers Armband for Worcestershire. So these people would have been at the railway station shimmying children onto the correct trains. As I said, over 1 million children were moved out to the countryside, and it was an amazing undertaking, and it worked. The only problem is, in the early part of the war, so from September the 3rd, when war officially broke out, up until 1940, not much was actually happening. Very few, if any, planes flew over Britain. There was no bombing raids until 1940. And some children did go back home. This period was often referred to as the phony war, the fake war, because people didn't actually believe a war was going on. Unfortunately, by September 1940, when the bombs rained down on places like London, in Birmingham, in Coventry, in Southampton, unfortunately, children were back in the cities. And even though we talk about the Operation Pied Piper in 1939, that wasn't the only evacuation. There was a further evacuation in 1940 because children went home, and there was even ones later on in the war when the V1 and V2 rockets were fired on Britain in 1944 and 1945. So it's quite interesting. But Operation Pied Piper was an amazing undertaking. Now, if you are doing a project like Lily and you've put together your suitcase to be evacuated, you got your little label on your gas mask, it might be worth making a fake diary, because some evacuees were very educated and did write diaries. Or you could write a letter, a fake letter. For example, I have a letter here, and this will give you a little idea of what to put. Dear Mom and Dad, I hope you are all right. I am fine, but I do miss you a lot. I like it here on the farm. We're allowed to bring the cows up from the field for milking. I like seeing all the animals. The food is good. We have apples and pears in the orchard. I'm allowed to climb trees, but not on a Sunday. The hen laid 2 eggs yesterday, and we had them for breakfast. I have grown 2 inches. I am being brave like you said. I remember my manners, and I'm working hard at my reading and writing. George is still scared of the cows. It's really quiet. I have not heard any planes. Miss you. Lots of love, Albert. So some activities to do whilst in lockdown. Make up your suitcase for an evacuee. Make sure you put a little label on. Make sure you write a letter or a fake diary of your time in the countryside. A little bit different from living in the town and city. Sadly, remember, your parents will be back where the bombing is. So put that into your letter, how worried you are for them whilst you're enjoying yourself in the countryside. So one final thing. Lily, we want to see proof that you're doing these jobs. Thank you for requesting it. And if there is anyone else out there that would like us to do a very specific thing, maybe some homework whilst you're in lockdown, do let us know. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Definitely subscribe on YouTube. And remember, we've also got Instagram. See you soon. Stay safe. Bye.